Because I didn't choose one of the automatic audio device setups, I'll need to configure all the inputs and outputs, the I/O of my interface manually, and that's just as well, so we can take a look at exactly what's involved with that. Now we need to go to the song setup window. We can get to it from the song menu and then song setup, and then we want to go to I/O setup. Now another way of getting it is we can simply click down here, for example, on the sample rate, and it'll bring up this song window with different settings to change the sample rate, but it'll bring up the same window and we can just jump to the audio I/O setup. Now, in most recording DAWs, the audio tracks directly correlate to the channels on your audio interface. In Studio One, there's a layer of software inputs and outputs, software I/O channels between your hardware audio and your tracks in your songs. And that's a good thing because it makes for compatibility if you have to switch between different studios with different audio hardware. So the idea is that each track in a song receives the signal from an input and then routes it to an output. And the inputs and outputs are made available to each track based on how we have the software I/O channel configuration created in this audio I/O setup window. So we have two tabs, one for inputs and one for outputs. And let's make this window a bit bigger. It's resizable. And we're going to focus on the input tab for the moment. Now, these matrices often confuse me, but this one's actually very intuitive. The important thing to remember is that the vertical columns are for the audio hardware device that you have. So the up-down vertical ones, my Apollo has mic 1, mic 2, mic 3, mic 4, and then ADAT 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then some virtual inputs, etc. So these vertical columns represent my audio hardware. And the horizontal rows show the created software I/O channels. This is what's going to appear within Studio One. So the software I/O channels are what we see and work with as input sources and output destinations on the tracks. Now, if we want to add to them, and I do because I potentially want to use more than just the two inputs on my interface, we can click the Add Mono or Add Stereo. So I'm going to hit Add Mono, and it adds an input channel. And to create the connection between the software I/O channel and the hardware I/O, we just need to click on the empty square at the intersection, which is this. And it's grayed out now because I have to hit apply. And there, you'll see it's done. So L and R stand for left and right, and M stands for mono. So you can add stereo channels if you want. And that'll create a ganged stereo pair, which is actually not what I want right now. So I'm going to click that one and hit remove. So I'm going to add a bunch of mono ones. I have so far the left and right and one additional one. There's two, and I want to add 4 more. So I can click that 4 more times, or I can click this add button, and that'll bring up a box which allows me to add multiple channels at once, and I can even determine the color. And I'll just put 4 in here, and we'll just leave the name generic for now, and I'll leave the color as is for now as well. And there they all are. And they're all by default assigned to their right position in the matrix, but of course you can easily click anywhere you need them to be. Now, these generic names don't do me much good. I want to name them for what I'm using them for. And you can see this jumping as I'm speaking. That's my VO mic. And I use that, for example, to often record guitar. And then I have these on drum mics. So I may as well name them with meaningful names for me. And that's what I'll see in the interface. So let me do that. And that's generally what I use. So I'm going to hit apply. And they're all in place now. And then we have that stereo left, right for the first two in case I do want to record something stereo, but I could also, if I needed or wanted to, create a stereo pair for 3 and 4 or 5 and 6, etc. But I don't need to. That's not what I'm planning to use it. Now we can make this default, and I'm going to do that. That way, every time I start a new song, this is the I/O setup that's going to be used. And if you don't like that, you can always just hit reset to default and you'll be back to your generic settings. And we can import or export these. So for example, if I export it, I've already saved one here for my Universal Audio Thunderbolt. I redid it to show you, but you can save it and name it here if you want. And then you can always import. And you can even drag the I/O configuration into this window. Now let's look at the output tab. And here I'm just using my main left and right outputs. I don't really need to configure all my other outputs. I'm not using them except for my headphone mixes. I am using Q1 left and right and Q2 left and right for my 2 stereo headphone mixes. So let me add 2 more stereo software channels here. And instead of here, I'm going to click this one for Q1 left and right and this one for Q2 left and right, and I'm going to name them. And I abbreviated the names so that they'll be more legible when I'm working with the inputs and outputs on the tracks. And we can even set an independent audition output here for when we're using the preview player and in the import file menu, when we want to hear files, maybe we have some processing on the main outputs or they're going to a different pair of speakers, we can set an alternate output here. And I've only got the headphones 1 and 2 set up, but some people have multiple pairs of speakers going to different outputs, so you can easily do that here. And there's also the new independent listen bus, new in Studio 1.5, which we'll look at later in the series. So this is all good. Let's hit apply, and we're ready to go. I'm going to hit export so I can save it, and I'm going to just click there, and I'll append 02 to the name. And so you can see the file pathway. At the main level of my hard drive, in the user folder, there's my user, documents, Studio One, and IO configurations. So let's hit save and OK, and I'll see you for more in the next video.